What I've been doing recently is that I've been trying to make videos that sort of summarize, or not exactly summarize, but let's say give some evaluation of groupings of previous videos I've made. That is to say, there's certain subjects I cover quite a lot. Things like gender issues, human rights, just wide range of things. But I'm trying to make videos these days that sort of reflect back on videos that I've made. Not from regret, but from summarizing my viewpoint. So one issue that I've covered before is issues connected with the People's Republic of China. Sorry, the lighting's a little bit, I know that's bright, but as long as you can hear me, I guess that's the main thing. Yeah, so I've made videos covering the People's Republic of China and Chinese politics, which of course is a very dicey area, but I have said before that nothing is taboo in my videos. I talk about anything that I feel like talking about. So in this video I want to express a little bit about whether I am objective about communism or not, speaking in the second person. Is Nathan Hazlett objective about the Chinese Communist Party? Of course I believe that I am, but it's fine, you know, it's one thing just saying that. I find a lot of Chinese netizens, there's sort of different types of people, because you can never generalize. You get the reactionary nationalists who come out with sort of hateful tirades about Westerners, and they get really worked up, and they really can't construct themselves without a hateful rant. Then there's people who are a lot more reasonable, and you can engage in debate, and they're respectful, and I have been in quite a number of those sort of debates, including very recently. In fact, if you're watching this video, there's a strong chance I've had a debate with you on the comment section, and I'll thank those people for being respectful and sharing their views in a respectful way. And if someone treats me like that, I'll try and be respectful back, even if I have a strong difference of opinion. So I guess for a lot of Chinese people, one thing I've noticed is there is definitely a defensive attitude from a lot of Chinese net users, and maybe I should concede that this is an entirely natural thing. Most people probably get defensive when their country is being criticised, and it doesn't necessarily mean that people agree with their government, but it's almost like, I suppose you would make this analogy, you might not get on particularly well with a family member, but you would still probably defend them if an outsider was attacking them. So likewise, Chinese netizens who make excuses for the Chinese government don't necessarily like the Chinese government. That's my perspective. It's just that they get this sort of it's a natural instinctive defensiveness. I don't think that sort of I don't think it's particularly open-minded to defend your country, and this is a general rule, not just about China, for anyone, including my fellow Britons incidentally. People shouldn't just defend their country because it is their country. They should be honest. So if a foreigner is saying something that is true, people should just acknowledge that that is the case. And I'm not just talking about China, I'm talking generally speaking. So someone said to me, oh, there's a big problem in Britain from yobbish behaviour. I would say, yeah, unfortunately you're right. So there are areas that we need to be just honest about. And to be fair, some of the debates I've been involved in, I have seen the other person as trying to be open-minded and concede that there are serious problems in China. So I have to be fair about this. But just to focus a little bit, regarding the Chinese Communist Party, I'm not going to beat around the bush. This is basically what I think about the Chinese Communist Party. I think for just over 60 years, I'm judging from the time that they've been in power, although they would certainly have powerful influence before that, but let's say since 1949, I believe the Chinese Communist Party has been one of the world's worst totalitarian regimes. It has lied, it has distorted, it has used massive propaganda, it has brutally crushed all opposition, it has used torture, it has used bloody purges, and I think many of the things that the CCP has done is morally repugnant. That's my core instinct. I feel that this political party has oceans of blood on its hands, and nothing will change my mind on that, because I've looked at so many different sources that testify to this. I'm not just talking about one source. I've seen so many sources that show what they've done, especially under Mao, but not just under Mao, afterwards as well. And I admit, I find it very, very hard to understand or accept when I hear Chinese people making excuses for this, because to me, I cannot comprehend how, and this is an outsider's perspective, but how people could be so cold, so indifferent to the suffering of their fellow countrymen and women under a one-party regime. Now, I can understand Chinese people not actively campaigning against the CCP. I can understand them not wanting to talk in the way about it that I do, because for one thing it might be risky, especially in mainland China. I think they would deny this, but it is true. It is difficult to criticise the CCP in mainland China. Not impossible, but difficult, without facing consequences. I've just seen a video of an elderly man beaten up by other old guys, apparently because he dared to say that Mao was a bad leader, and they basically rough him up a bit. It's a street somewhere. Unfortunately, that is a mentality that still exists in China. It's not universal. I think among younger people there's more, it would be easier to sort of have discussion on that. And a lot of my Chinese friends, even if they've defended the Communist Party, they have conceded that Mao was basically a tyrant. So the personality cult around Mao, I don't think it is as bad as it once was, but there is still definitely a shroud of protection around him that is unacceptable given the level of crimes that he's done. At this point, I should probably say one of the main sort of things that I think Chinese people have is that foreigners have no right to have an opinion on this, or they should keep their nose out of it. There's still a very closed mentality in China. It's very much echoes what the government sort of says, which is it's an internal affair. The reason I have a problem with that is, to me, humanitarian issues is nothing to do with nationality. I see the world, my world philosophy is this: there are no borders when it comes to human rights and humanitarianism. There are no borders. There's different situations, there's different histories, there's different backdrops, and I know that when I've been in debates, even with close friends, the common sort of thing that is said is that China has a unique historical context. I think that's one of the main things. Another thing that I often notice is that if there's one single fear in China, and especially from the Chinese Communist Party, is an absolute dread of instability. That is the number one thing. And many people sort of seem to share the Communist Party's concerns about that. Now, a few words on that. Firstly, it's entirely understandable. Believe it or not, I don't want to see an unstable China. I really, really don't, because when you have instability, people suffer, and it's not something I want to see. But blaming democracy for that, or trying to say that, oh, if China becomes democratic, we'll become unstable, I think that's I think that has little basis in fact. And people often say, oh, look at the Middle East. But the Middle East problems you cannot blame democracy on that. They have much more to do with religion and religious divide than they do with democracy. I mean, I would counter it and say, well, look at the number of democracies in the world that are successful, relatively successful, progressive countries, and stable for that. Look at Canada, look at the United Kingdom, look at France, look at Germany, look at a whole range of other countries that are multi-party systems, that are wealthy, that are politically stable. So the idea that democracy will bring on instability is a phony argument, in my opinion. With all due respect, I don't think that is, and to me that is just the Communist Party's propaganda unfortunately having effect, because people believe it and then they think, oh well, if China goes for democracy we'll have instability. It is true that there has been unrest in China in recent years, but that is because of resentment at party corruption and issues whereby people can see clearly they've got very arrogant. Not necessarily on human rights issues, but on other wider issues, especially environmental issues, especially corruption issues. So clearly China is a country that is rapidly changing, but there is still this incredibly stubborn collective, if not amnesia, then denial about its dark past. Now I've seen Chinese films, segments of Chinese films, where they do show the nastier elements of the Cultural Revolution. So it's not that it's completely glossed over. Nevertheless, it is indisputable that the Chinese Communist Party energetically tries to cover up its past crimes. I mean, discussion of the Tiananmen Square crackdown is forbidden in China. You type it into the internet. I've tried, I have personally tried when I was in China. What came up was no results found. So it's pretty obvious that this censorship is used to try and silence any debate whatsoever. And for me, this is fundamentally unfair. If you have a situation where only one side is allowed an opinion, as is the case with China, that's not about stability, that's about unfairness. I mean, this is the problem with China. It is still, by nature, a totalitarian state. It's not comparable to North Korea. You can't really compare the two situations because the Chinese people really aren't that brainwashed. I want to emphasize that. I've been there, I've spoken to many people. It's not a case that they're all brainwashed, subservient red guards. That was another era, and today is different. Nevertheless, there are a lot of people willing to make excuses for the communist regime. And I've heard things like, oh, well, we want to move on, so we forgive them. And yet, they don't seem to have the same attitude when it comes to foreigners. They haven't forgiven the Opium Wars. So I think there is a hypocritical attitude in the Chinese position on this. And that is, again, something I find hard to accept. Because as a foreigner, I feel somewhat, I wouldn't use the word discrimination, that would be too strong a word, but I do feel it's unfair to vilify the West and yet make excuses for the CCP. That makes no sense. So, but some of this is practical when you think about it. China is an ancient civilization going back about 4,000 years to the Shang Dynasty. Now, it's been open for approximately 35 years. So clearly, that is far too short a time for it to really change this collective mentality. I say collective, I'm not saying everyone thinks the same, but what I am saying is that there is a common trend. And I admit, from my perspective, sometimes it's very, very awkward. I actually have a lot of Chinese friends, and I've been in heated debates with them, and our friendship has almost been lost. I value friendship, and I didn't want that to happen, so I had to sort of patch things up, and so did they. So for me, it's a difficult thing, because sometimes I really feel very angry with the Communist Party's lies, with their censorship, and with their utter disregard for basic human dignity. I mean, I know people will say they've lifted millions of people out of poverty, and you know, I acknowledge that not everything they have done is bad. Okay, so earlier on I said I try to be objective on this. I know not everything they have done is bad. That is something to be welcomed, of course it is. And also, it would be unreasonable to expect any government in a country as big as China to sort of take a back seat and not take quite a strong position. You do need a strong government controlling a country as big as China, of course you do. But actually, their lies, their censorship, and their draconianism, in my view, is actually going to create more problems in the long term, because people are not stupid, they're going to see past it. And there has actually been a lot of unrest in the past 5 years, so it's going to backfire. Okay, my time is running up, but I stand by what I say about the CCP, and nothing anyone has said changes my mind on that. But I do try to acknowledge that not everything they have done is bad. I don't mind people pointing out their good side and the things that they've done is good, but what I cannot tolerate is the lies and the dishonesty about their bad side. That is something I cannot stomach. because it is blatantly unfair. So it's not a case that I have a problem with people saying nuclear lift to people at poverty and this sort of thing. What I can't stand is that people make excuses for things that really are inexcusable.